Today we're talking all about the lack of housing in Hamilton, Ontario. Welcome back everybody, and thank you so much for joining me again this week. It is a true pleasure to have you tuning in each and every week. My name is Justin Little. I'm a local real estate agent here in Hamilton, Ontario that loves making educational videos about the real estate market. If you like this video, be sure to pop a like on it. It'll get in front of more people that can benefit from this information. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe. Now let's get into the good stuff that I want to talk about because this is a really interesting topic. I'm joined today by Igor from Kingswood Engineers. Igor, thank you so much for coming in. I know people probably saw our previous video, so this is video number 2. First one was about renovations, and I think this is a good follow-up because of what the third video is going to be. It's going to come out part 3. But there's obviously an issue with the amount of housing in Hamilton, right? And there's plans from the federal and provincial governments to try and expand this housing. But you've identified sort of this missing middle, as you refer to it. So I'm really interested to hear your take on this.
Yeah, it's an interesting topic, mainly because people think that the governments aren't doing enough. The reality is that they've never done more, and they are being extremely progressive with their policies. What's happening, though, is we are in a spot where there is so much bureaucracy that, unfortunately, we've got an issue of that missing middle, meaning we've got single-family dwellings and we've got skyscrapers, and then the multifamily stuff. Anyone's tried to develop something like this, a quadplex, a sixplex, even a triplex, let's say, they very quickly run into the number one issue, which is zoning. Zoning dictates what's allowed to be built on a lot. The classic example I give to identify why is there a housing crisis in Ontario, the classic example is we had a client who purchased 2 side-by-side lots in St. Catharines and called us up and said, "Hey Igor, I've got these 2 small homes on 2 big lots. Let's see what we can build. Can we do an 8-plex? Can we do 12 units? I think it'd be really beneficial in St. Catharines." On a side note, when we spoke to the mayor in St. Catharines, they love the idea of adding density. So we looked it up. We looked up the zoning, and I had to have this conversation with them to say, hey, according to zoning, if you demolish those 2 single-family dwellings and join the lots, you will be allowed to put up a duplex.
So gaining nothing, right? You're basically eliminating, right?
So the real issue is the zoning bylaws that dictate to have a triplex or a quad, you need 2 acres or 3 acres, whatever it is. Those were written in a very different time, 70s, 80s, when affordability was very different, but also density was very different. So essentially those have not been updated. And the issue we get into is municipalities are very worried about infrastructure, sewage, water, electricity. So now we've got a very motivated provincial government that says we have to add density. The zoning rules aren't working. How do we get more units on a lot? So what they did was in 2010, I believe, they said, okay, we can have a secondary suite inside of homes. The municipalities put up a big fuss because of the density issues or the services issues, and it's been very slow. Now that the provincial government has said we're allowed 3 units on 1 lot, which is the right move, and it will help, municipalities have said we can't even accommodate 2, so we're going to drag our feet.
And you touched on a big point that I think a lot of people miss when we're talking about, like, why don't they just do more? Why is it not just do more? Just why can't you put more on, right? And it's that the sewer systems and infrastructure might not actually have the capabilities of keeping up with these additional units.
I agree, but I always say, okay, we've got a housing crisis. That's one concern. Capacity of our public works is another concern. They are not at the same level. Like we are redlining on the affordability crisis. So while I agree that it is a concern, I cannot believe it's the reason to prevent additional housing from happening. So
and the way it's structured too, like you said, you know, this was a thing that was implemented, having up to the 3 units on a residential property was really, like, the Ontario government was really pushing for it and said, like, you know, we're moving forward with this is what's going to happen. And so the cities are just trying to figure out a way to make it happen now within the structure that they've been given. It's like, okay, we have to try to accommodate this.
I would say it's slightly less optimistic.
Okay.
We have 2 tiers of government. The provincial government that dictates our laws bylaws, so changes the Housing Act, but it's the municipal governments that are in charge of actually implementing those changes in the zoning bylaws. The issue is, while the Ontario government 100% is telling them you have to do this, there's a lot of mechanisms for them to delay the process. And I understand their perspective. They want to address all the issues before moving ahead, but their time scale is 10 years. The housing crisis is now.
Yeah.
So what we're seeing a lot, we get a lot of calls about, hey, can I do a garden suite, or can I do a triplex? And we say, from an engineering standpoint, absolutely. There's a lot of contractors that can build it out fairly quickly, a couple months. From a permits and zoning perspective, it is still as difficult as ever. To give you a really good example, we had a client in Mississauga call us up and say, I've got a beautiful lot. I want to do a really nice garden suite in the rear, not even to rent out, but I've got family members that would really benefit from this. Let me know what's allowed. We look up the zoning, no new info from the law that was passed 1 year ago. It became ascended last year in November, Bill 23, to now. There has been 0 updates to the zoning bylaws, meaning you have to submit your permits and the city will evaluate it on what they think they will make the zoning bylaws.
Okay.
There's no
That's interesting.
There's nothing written down.
Yeah.
So you can see how that's an extremely difficult way to operate, which means it's going to be months before you get permit approval. The costs are very high because they want regrading, they want the sewer lines upgraded. And then the biggest obstacle we've seen to actually adding significant density, meaning 4 units, 6 units, is the parking requirements. So while the municipality says, yes, now a triplex is allowed, but you have to have 3 parking spots.
Yeah.
So to accommodate 3 parking spots on a typical Hamilton lot.
Yeah. And I know some areas from Hamilton, they've been able to exclude, like I know there's that map you can look at just to see whether you need to do the extra parking or not, because there's just a lot of properties in Hamilton that don't even have 1 parking spot, like it's street parking, right?
Exactly.
And those are the homes, which is funny enough, those actually tend to be the homes that are typically the larger homes, like you see downtown, those 2.5-story ones that would be perfect for a conversion into a duplex or a triplex, right? And the parking's not available, but I know they've tried to accommodate that. So you think the biggest holdup with this then is just the city's not responding fast enough to the demand there? Because I feel like there's a lot of demand out there. Like I get so many calls on people asking about legal basements or garden suites. I have clients that want to know about it. And it's just such a gray area, and the lack of information out there, it's actually pretty outstanding. You have to, like I was part of some special Facebook group and talked to so many contractors just to try to figure it out, like people that are actually doing it, right?
But that's exactly it. So the reason there's a lack of information is because the building department, their incentives are to do things properly, by the book, and to think long term. While those are excellent items to check off, they are a huge impediment, fast development. So the reason there's no info available is because the municipalities don't have a big interest in sorting this stuff out, because there's a lot of public works consequences. And also they deal with the complaints. So when someone says, hey, I want a triplex here in a single family lot, it's the city that gets the neighbors complaining. So you can see why there is a complete disincentive for them to move this along, which is fair, but something has to change because Ontario's population is growing and housing starts have flatlined. Because the cost and the permits, the zoning is way too prohibitive.
Yeah, especially new construction. Like the prices of a lot of new construction developments now are just astronomical compared to the actual resale prices, right? You might buy a house that's a couple of years older and it's 100, 200,000 cheaper than what a new build might be asking, but it's the cost of construction now, right?
Well, so it's even worse when you're trying to do 6 lots or six units on a lot, 4 units on a lot. Essentially what happens is you're into each unit like 400,000.
Wow.
Which is a hard proposition, right? That's a lot of upfront capital that you need to provide. So essentially, the excellent example is California. San Francisco passed similar increased density zoning bylaws. The net effect has been, I want to say, like 200, 300 ADUs being built in a year, which is 1% of what's needed. And it's specifically related to these lot restrictions. So I think there has to be a change at the municipal level. The province, I think, has done its job. They've really tried to address this. Without different incentives at the municipal level, we're just not going to build any additional density. And you as a real estate agent know what that looks like.
Yeah.
You've seen it when there's not enough supply. What happens?
Yeah, it was nuts. Yeah.
27-year-olds are $1 million into a townhome
Mm-hmm.
with a $6,000 a month mortgage. That's going to have some real impacts on our quality of life.
Yeah, absolutely. And then even going back, like these ADUs, people are doing them. They are successfully happening. Like I have, because I've been in a lot of legal basement apartments. I've been in legal garden suites too. But it just, from the sounds of what you're saying, is part of the issue is just the length of time that it takes to get one of these units approved, active, livable, rentable, whatever it is longer than it really should be.
Yeah. So the issue that I see on my end on the building permit side is there's a certain number of items that need to be addressed, and when something can't get addressed, hey, you don't have enough setback, or your fire separation has some minor issues. Until you resolve it, nothing can move ahead. So the classic example, we're doing an ADU or a basement ADU now in York. All the permits get submitted, and they said, hey, you're near a flood zone. So you're not inside of it, you're near a flood zone. You have to get conservation involved. That is a 4-month delay just on that item. So until we have some sort of standardized procedure, hey, we're submitting the exact same request as before. Can you approve it immediately? This is going to become too cost prohibitive to get real volume.
Well, that's a great point. That's a great topic too.
Yeah.
I love talking about that because we really do need more of those, right? And people want to build them. People want to do them. They want to complete these projects, but it sometimes seems daunting, and it seems like the pieces don't always align, or it's a bit more difficult than it really needs to be to make it happen, right? And get a quicker solution to the shortage of housing that we have.
Yep. We need standardization on the construction side. We need standardization permit approval side.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That's what it's going to take. Yeah.
I appreciate it, Igor. Thanks so much for talking about that. Thanks for coming in to talk about it.
Anytime.
Thank you, each and every one of you guys, for tuning in each and every week. We truly, truly appreciate it. And we'll talk to you again next week.